So let's crack on with today's webinar. So I'm Gary Hodgson, and I'm delighted to be introducing today's ICK Shares Live webinar, which is number 24. We're really getting through these. Behind the scenes, we have Barnaby Sargent-Medix, who without none of this would happen, as he coordinates all of our live events. And also with me, I have Sergio Lara-Berthial. Hi, Sergio.
Hi, Gary. Thank you. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today and taking time, not out of work, but out of the Euros, out of watching the football, to be with us today. We have a fantastic lineup today. We are going back to the topic of parenting sport with two fantastic guests, Richard Shorter from Non-Perfect Dad and Gordon McClellan from Working with Parenting Sport. But before we meet them, back to Gary for some housekeeping.
Yeah, of course. So just a reminder to those who may not have joined one of these sessions before, be sure to keep your cameras and your microphones off throughout the session. But if you do have any questions for our speakers, please submit them via the chat function here on Zoom, or if you're watching live on YouTube, please also type any of your questions in the comment section there. As always, we're here to share and learn, so please be respectful to all who are presenting and participating today in this webinar. Over to Sergio to get the panel started.
Thanks, Gary. Now, before we move on to setting the scene, just a quick reminder of how the webinar is going to run. We're going to have the two presenters give us the talk, and then after they conclude, we will have some questions for them from Gary and I, and we will encourage you to, throughout the webinar, to type your questions on the chat, because then we will also have a chance to ask those questions to Richard and Gordon. Now, what about working with parents in sport? Well, we did our webinar a couple of weeks ago with Camila and Nikki to start exploring this fantastic topic. And it is a topic that is fundamental to youth sport because parents play a number of roles that have a great influence in a child's experience of sport. By fulfilling such roles, parents help to enhance children's enjoyment of sport. They encourage long-term involvement and ensure that the children have a chance to gain the range of psychological, social, and physical benefits associated with the sport participation. The importance of parents within the lives of young athletes cannot be underestimated. They're not the enemy, the parents. Instead, they are a very important member of the team that we have to support and work with. So our speakers today will explore parental engagement, a positive parental culture, the importance of quality communication, expectation management, handling conflict, and parents' experiences of competition days. To introduce our guest, I'm going to hand over back to Gary.
Thanks, Sergio. So we're going to head over to Gordon McClellan first from Working with Parents in Sport. So Gordon is the CEO and founder of Working with Parents in Sport. After 20 years as a teacher and coach to all age levels, from under sevens up to adults, Gordon set up WWPIS to support organisations, parents and coaches in working together to provide children with the best possible sporting experiences. He's also the author of 3 books, Two Hats, a book for parents and coaches who are coaching or thinking about coaching their own children, Great Sports Parenting, and Engage. His clients include over 10 national governing bodies worldwide, the Youth Sports Trust, UK Coaching, and he's been a keynote speaker at leading conferences all over the world. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Gordon McClellan. Hi, Gordon.
Hi, Gary. Delighted to join you. Thank you very much for having us, and good afternoon, everybody. Sergio said, I hope I haven't disturbed you too much from the Euros, but I think we've got an hour till kickoff anyway, so we might be all right if I can get moving with this. I'm going to crack straight on today, and I'm going to encourage you to use the chat function throughout my talk, because I think it's important that we get little bits of feedback. And I'm going to look today at what parental engagement actually is. It's become something of a buzz phrase, and lots of people seem to have slightly different definitions of what that means to them. What we're looking for in creating a positive parent culture, and then ultimately what lots of us probably recognise as coaches or people who work in education, is actually the importance of that quality communication and actually having a strategy that is going to work and is going to be effective. Now, straight away, I want you to start, and hopefully you'll join in on the chat function for me. What does parental engagement mean to you? If I said to you today as a coach, or if you're in charge of a sporting organisation, what does parental engagement mean to you? Can you type some key words into the chat function for me? And then I'll share with you our definition, which is currently on about take 185 as we sort of continue to work in this space. So please use the chat function. I can see responses when they come through. So what does parental engagement mean to you? Okay, so I want some transparency, support, listening, advising. We've got support, parents contributing to the development and learning, absolutely. We want trust between both parties. Yeah, holistic development. Aaron, you'll be pleased to know that's in the take 185 definition. Communication, keyword. Yeah, well, parent, absolutely. The taxi service. I think Richard and I will both vouch for that. I seem to do nothing else but drive around at the moment across North Yorkshire. Parents certainly add to the fun and keep our children going. So again, look, we've got lots and lots of key words there. And most people sort of have the right idea. The reason I say it is that in the US Soccer Convention a couple of years ago, they asked 22 people on the way in what parental engagement meant to them. And I think about 16 or 17 of them actually came up with very different definitions. So it is quite interesting to see what it means to people. But this is where we are as things stand today. And there's a number of key words for me here. A positive role. I think we all recognise that in certainly this work of working with parents that we need to be a lot more positive in the role that they play and move away from these campaigns that we're very much telling them what to do, how to behave, and perhaps making things uncomfortable for them. That a parent can play as a partner. Keyword there again, not this idea that coaches work in one space and parents are in a totally different space. So it's as a partner to the organisation and coach in the holistic and athletic development of their child. Now, again, we're not just as coaches looking to develop the athletic ability of the young people we work with. We need to have our programs and our sessions that have a much more wider impact, I guess, in their holistic development of their child, leading to a lifetime participation in sport or physical activity. We need this generation of children. We look at dropout numbers across the world, particularly in those teenage years. There's very few sports that are bucking that trend. And we all have a responsibility to set these environments that allow these children to go on and continue in sport, to then become the next generation of healthy parents who perhaps then encourage sport with their young people, perhaps the next generation of coaches. And I think this is something that we all probably would look to strive for. And in creating this positive parent culture, either as a coach or as an organisation, I think we created this a while ago whilst doing some work with British Gymnastics. But I think the reality is that we can't, with the way society is, whether it was the right thing or not 20 years ago, whether it was the right thing 5 years ago, and whether it's still happening now, there is no way with everything that we are seeing that's coming out of the sporting world that we can have, or is it healthy to have environments where parents go through one door and there's a barrier and coaches and athletes go through another. Now, the other side of that, having been a coach of 25 years myself, I'm not going to lie and say that I haven't pretended to be on my phone when not wanting to talk to a parent about little Johnny for another hour, because I quite frankly haven't got another hour to have that dialogue yet again, because I understand from a coach perspective how challenging it can sometimes be with parents. And actually, we want the space to be able to do our coaching without feeling that they're hovering above us and that they're having too much of an impact on us being able to get on with what we really want to do. But that doesn't mean that they can't be involved. And I think that ultimately what we want is a really healthy relationship where the parents are doing their bit to support, coaches are producing amazing sessions, amazing environments, really good communication, all in the best interests of the children. But everybody understands their role and feels like they're working together for ultimately the most important person, which is the child that we're coaching. Now, to do that, one of the things that I think coaches find difficult, but actually when it's talked to them or we discuss it with them, is that there can be a negative perception of parents. I think lots of coaches pick their worst case scenario parents. I think in my 20 years in education, I can list off very easily the ones that were an absolute nightmare. Probably in amongst that, there were thousands of brilliant ones, which there certainly were, but they're sort of a little bit back in the back of the mind. And I think that, and still in some sports we work with at the moment, there's still this idea that parents are the enemy. We don't want to work with parents. We don't want to engage with them. And I think part of it is that some coaches haven't thought about strategies for working with parents in the first place, but we have to understand where parents are coming from. And I think I wasn't particularly good at this in the early stages of my coaching career. And it was actually only when I became a parent myself that I started to think, whoa, this is really, really tough. This is really, really challenging as a parent. And how can I best support that as a coach? But we know that parents find competition stressful. They can find watching, just by the sheer fact that they're nervous and they want the children to do well, that can be challenging. The interactions they have with other parents, now whether that be the behavior of other parents near them, the fact that they maybe want to stand in silence, maybe they don't like how other parents are talking to each other. There's a number of things for individuals that can be stressful. They may see inappropriate behavior. They may not like the language used by parents next to them or some of the body language. It's definitely hard work when your children underperform. That horrible feeling where you feel a little bit sick and you're a little bit hot under the collar, and it's really uncomfortable because none of us want to see our children struggle. So that can be stressful. And we've also got to, help parents just to sort of be ready with potential outcomes of competition, because it can be a really challenging time. We know from our own work that the organisational piece for a parent can be a challenge, and certainly things like the scheduling and the logistics for families is an ongoing challenge all the time. Many struggle with the finance of sport. Many struggle with the lack of information, perhaps given by organisations. Many find the selection policies challenging, particularly when their children are on the wrong side of those. And many find that the impact of things like injuries can be a huge challenge as well. And then as children develop and they go through sport and maybe become more involved, or maybe enter those teenage years or enter performance pathways, parents then struggle with the challenge of, meeting the demands of education against sport, for example, worried about whether all the sport may have an impact on their future, their job prospects, however we balance those. Some worry about the impact on their child's social life because sport can perhaps take over. Many parents actually worry about the impact on their own social lives because they're spending the whole time trying to facilitate the experience for their children. So there's an awful lot going on there, and I challenge everybody to say, and how much support do we actually provide parents in dealing with or helping them manage some of those things? And the reality is that despite our own experiences of parents, they're not really out to get us. They really love their children. Human emotion runs high. It always does when it comes to sport. It often does when it comes to our own children. Actually, in an ideal world, parents want to see their child succeeding. I think more for me, Richard knows this because he read our blog. We've had a really challenging couple of months with my son released from a football academy, a total shock, no communication, no nothing. And actually the sheer joy for us as a parent at the moment is he's just loving playing his sport and is a different person again. And actually, I said this morning to my wife that actually, do you know what, the just best bit is he really looks like he's enjoying it, and quite honestly, I don't care. And I think we can often lose sight of that as parents sometimes. But actually, we also want our children to feel safe and protected. And actually, we probably think our children a little bit better than they actually are, but I'm afraid that's what parents do. I'm not sure that I've got a magic solution for that one. And I was doing some work in gymnastics, and we were talking to some parents, and a parent said to me, you know, it is like my heart walking around outside their body and all over the mat. And I think that goes back to that competition piece where parents are watching, and you know, they're living every moment and breathing every moment, and we've got to recognize that as coaches. But I think also in today's society, where maybe sport does cost money in lots of situations and parents are committing huge amounts of time, you know, are they expecting a return on their investment? Because parents will say to me, Gordon, how do I know if it's all been worth it? You know, has it been worth this? And what I say now, and again, it's another of my sort of take 135, I say to parents, if you have used sport, which still remains today one of the safest vehicles to equip your children with a wide range of life and character skills that will allow them to thrive in whatever environment they choose to go into, then it will have been worth every single ounce of time, investment, emotion, cost, whatever that may be. But I think parents do expect some return on investment. But I have to remind parents that we're not dealing on the stock exchange here. We're not dealing with commodities. We're dealing with people, and children are people. And just because we've committed huge amounts of time and huge amounts of money, are we going to necessarily see certain outcomes? So what can we do as coaches and organizations? Well, we've got to make sure that our programs, time and money, outcome. But what is the outcome? Because if the outcomes, well, I want an Olympic gold medal, or I want to be a professional footballer, or I want some aspects that we maybe see, there's going to be an awful lot of disappointed people from the sporting experience just based on those sheer odds that are out there. So we need to be selling the wide-ranging benefits of our programs. And we need to be selling far more than just the technical, tactical, that the outcomes are geared up to elite performance, because we've got so many different strands to the sporting experience for young people. And promoting the multifaceted child, I'm going to put both in and outside of aquatics here. But actually that feeling that in any sport, that it isn't just about the sport they're doing, and we've all got a role to play as coaches, as educators, in ensuring that we have rounded individuals who aren't defined purely by their sport. So what program are we actually selling to parents and as coaches? Do we actually do a good enough job at painting the picture of what these programs may look like? Now, we can't give them every answer. We can't give them every scenario. We can't sort of hold their hand through everything that crops up. But we're not really painting any picture, and there's no manual, just as there's no manual for parenting in general, really to help us. And often, certainly in a sporting context, parents are trying to do their very, very best. And many are basing their behaviours and attitudes perhaps on their own sporting experience, or perhaps the experiences that they had with coaches, perhaps what their parents were like with them. And if we don't provide high quality information and support, it's going to be very difficult for them not to see sport as what it is on Sky Sports or on the TV, because that's what's in the media, that's what they perceive, and that's what's more in the face than anything else. But I think, you know, within any program, within any sport, we've got to be very clear about the program that we're selling. Are we all about participation? Are we doing something around performance? Are we looking to strive for excellence? But actually, we can have all three. But I think they do need to be separated. And I think that if we can separate them and we can maybe paint those pictures for parents for what each of those strands may look like, then actually that gives us a better chance for parents to make informed decisions, to actually be prepared for the next stages and what may come of it. And in doing that, is our information transparent and clear enough? And within that, when we talked earlier about the holistic development of people, are our programs underpinned by this character development? And are we doing more than just focusing on the technical and tactical side of sport? But undoubtedly, this all hinges on proactive communication. And undoubtedly, it's one of the most important skills. If we can provide information to parents, and plenty of it, the more reassured they are. Doesn't mean they're going to read everything that you provide, but it does mean that parents perhaps recognize that you have things in control and they feel in the loop. And if they want to be involved, then they have that information available to them. Likewise, I think as coaches, I think opening up communication lines on our terms can help parents feel part of the process. And I think within any given program, we need to be providing those opportunities to talk face to face, opportunities to email at certain times in a week, for example. And I think that we have to make an effort to build some connection with these parents with some form of face-to-face communication. And I think back to my experience in education, I don't think there can be anything worse than a parent receiving some information from either a coach or a teacher who's never spoken to them, particularly if then that first bit of information is something negative. I think we've got to be able to put names to faces and not know people as sort of Johnny's dad or that's the nightmare parent in that corner. And I think we can only do that by actually even exchanging pleasantries. And it was amazing in a parent workshop that we did recently, as I've lost a bit of track of time with COVID. But a parent said, do you know what, Gordon, actually, do you know what? It'd be really nice once if a coach just said, thanks for bringing them. And that was really alarming. And then I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not sure how many times I thank people either for actually that role. And I think that sort of pleasantries and connections is really, really important. But I think, we haven't got lots of time today, but I do think that in terms of our communication, we do need to consider the type of information, how often we're communicating, what methods we're going to use. I do strongly believe that if we're delivering bad or negative news to young people and parents, or there's something negative coming from it, we should be looking to do it on a face-to-face basis, if that's at all possible. And obviously lots of you will use things like WhatsApp and Spond for organization and logistics. You may look to use Twitter and Facebook. We know lots of parents are using social media to engage with information, a chance to maybe back up or underpin some of your philosophies in the work that you do. But when I was thinking about parents need support and the type of information that they might know, and I sort of trawled through all our webinars and all our website, I was thinking, right, what have we written about? What have we talked about? And then so I've come up with this as the final part of the bit from us today. These are some of the things that I was thinking parents could do with knowing. One, that they're the most important and they have a huge role. Do they use sport to promote character development? How do they support their children when things have gone wrong? How do you help your kids manage disappointment? Because that's really challenging. Parents find that really difficult. Why do their children play and why do they quit? Do the parents actually know the answers to those? And have they ever been encouraged to ask them? Do parents understand failure and the fact that it's a large part of the learning process? Because I know it's really hard watching our children fail. So have we supported them, particularly when children are put into learning pits in coaching environments and things go wrong? Do parents know the importance of having a lovely home environment that's away from sport? Children are under so much pressure today from social media and the pressure out in the world that actually home needs to be a really safe place. Do parents understand that there's going to be plenty of ups and downs, and how do we help support them with that? What do they do if the children are lacking in confidence? What do we do as a parent to help build confidence in our young people? Do our parents understand potential? Do they understand the dangers of making comparisons, particularly at an early age? Do they understand the why of positive sideline behavior? Not being told the rules and what they should do, but why it may be better to support in a certain way. Do we encourage multi-sport participation rather than just being focused on one, and get parents to understand that just because you spend so much time doing one sport that there's no guarantees? Do they understand how to navigate the car journey home, which can be a real point of conflict? Do they know what great questions look like when speaking to their children? Do they know how to handle it? Because lots of parents say, God, I never know quite what to say, particularly if they haven't got any experience in a particular sport or a particular sporting environment. Parents have to manage parental peer pressure, listening to other people on the side. How do we help support them with that? And before you know it, there, you've seen that. And I've just taken a snapshot of certain areas, and there'll be hundreds and hundreds of things more out there. And yet we often don't provide anything beyond the logistics and a few hellos and thank yous. I hope you've enjoyed our little snapshot of some of the work we do today. Please check out the Working with Parents in Sport website. We run workshops and webinars, huge website platform, loads of content on there for parents, for high performing athletes, for coaches, lots of videos and podcasts. There's online courses on there. These are our 3 books. Please check them out. Great sports parenting, parents of really young children setting out on their sporting journey. The other 2 are for coaches. Engage is one of our webinars that we deliver all around the world for coaches as part of coach education on how we build those positive relationships with parents. And then our Amazon bestseller, 2 Hats, which is for those parents who volunteer and take on the roles of coaching their own children, which is I guess a unique environment in itself. And we were very fortunate that we had huge support. You'll see there Harry Redknapp wrote the foreword, and we had so many contributions from leading figures across the sporting world. It would be great to stay connected with you all. I've really enjoyed meeting you today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar. There's our website, there's our social media, and that's it from us. So thank you very much.
Gordon, thank you very, very much for your insights and your very engaging presentation. A few questions have already come in, which I'll save for after Richard has presented his piece too. If you wouldn't mind just stopping the share, and I will introduce Richard to our audience today. So Richard Shorter of Non-Perfect Dad leads a double life. By day, he's a Baptist church minister on a challenging estate in Romford, Essex. But by night, he works with top elite sports teams, supporting the parents of their athletes. His clients include Manchester United, England Rugby, Bath Rugby, England and Wales Cricket, England Hockey, and Manchester City. He spent 20 years supporting parents to be more effectively connected with organisations and the organisations which their children attend. Richard, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the I Coach Kids Shares webinar series. Over to you.
Mate, thanks for having me. I nearly had myself on mute then. That's like such a primary school error, isn't it, for Zoom after all these times. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gordon. That's a fantastic introduction. I'm going to take where Gordon's taken us to, and I'm going to just drill into some real practical ways to perhaps address a few of the areas that Gordon highlighted. It's a real privilege to be with you. So we're going to look at expectation management. Gordon definitely mentioned that. We're going to look at how you handle conflict, because whenever you put people together, there's always conflict, and whenever you put people together with their children, there's often tension. So we're going to look at how we just some practical ways that you can support your coaches or yourself in having that. And we're going to look at the competition day experience for parents. How do we help parents manage that competition day so that their young people have better experiences? That's what we want, kids to have good experiences from their sports. So let's crack on with the first one, expectation management. I think expectation management, when I say to coaches, what are the challenges of engaging with parents, expectation management comes top. And I think the first thing I just want to say is I think expectations aren't dirty. Okay, well, they're not bad things to have expectations. In fact, it's really healthy that parents have expectations. As Gary said, I work in quite an interesting community in East London where a number of the parents I work with have no expectations for their children. So and that's that's very hard to work with. So there's nothing wrong with expectations. In fact, I think it's a sign of healthy parenting and healthy love that we want our children to succeed and go forward. The challenge is, like anything in life, when it gets turned up a little bit too loud and pride gets involved and social status and kind of keeping up with the Joneses. So how do we help parents manage the expectation management issue? Well, the first thing I think we do is we use the kids' voices themselves. Okay, let the kids talk to the parents about why they play. I'm working with a soccer team in America. I think that's football. I haven't quite got to the bottom of that. And because American sport's slightly different to UK sport, they've managed to put all the parents through a video course at the start of the season. But it's an unusual video course because it's me hosting a 5-minute conversation that the parents and children then have together. So it isn't just a course for parents. It isn't just a course for kids. It's a conversation starter between parents and children. And a load of the conversations around, why do you play? What do you get out of it? Who's your best friend when you come and play? What's the best thing your coach does? So we're amplifying the voice in parents' heads about what kids find is really valuable in this, because kids will wear the t-shirts of their favorite team or their favorite athlete, and there's nothing wrong with children having that aspiration to be like their favorite tennis player, athlete, footballer, swimmer, etc. But kids don't just go on about those players. They talk about having fun, they talk about enjoyment, they talk about getting good stash, they talk about being competitive. And so if we can use the voices of children in that process, so whether you're on a pathway or grassroots club, how might you gather the voices of your athletes to help the parents hear that? Because that will help the parents balance out and manage those expectations. Secondly, we just need to be really honest with parents that there are exciting moments in sport. Okay, if you're getting to a cup final and you're calling a competition a cup final, that's exciting. And sport has this beautiful, wonderful place in society that gets us really excited about and it just does something to us, doesn't it? Sport, I can't even quite find the right words. As a church minister, I might even say sport is really spiritual in what it does to us as a society. It holds a very unique place in how it helps us connect with one another, feel part of a tribe, deal with our challenges and stresses, enjoy being competitive. I mean, I'm not a massive football fan, but I will be watching England later on today play Scotland because it's an exciting moment. And so coaches, if there's an exciting moment coming up, for example, my son plays a bit of rugby, and when the club were asked to nominate a number of players to go forward to the local pathway to start that kind of potentially journey on it. Well, there isn't such a thing as elite sport with children, is there? But you understand what I say if I use that language. Everybody got really excited, and the coaches did a great job of calling all the parents in and saying, listen, chill, here are the numbers, here's what's going to happen, here's the reality that nobody goes through this smoothly. So if there's an exciting moment come up, be proactive in managing that and handling it. Be honest with the parents about, look, it's final today, but that doesn't mean we behave differently than we did when it was just a friendly. Okay, so don't just hope that parents are going to behave differently. Give them some coaching and support, and that could just be 2 minutes after a match. Okay, focus on what's really important. I ask parents in the sessions I do, describe your child at their 40th. I can't even remember who I did this with. We'll have a look around, but look at the words that are coming up there. Nobody is saying, this was in a sporting pathway, by the way, so this was for kids who are already being labelled as having that kind of potential, and I think we could debate whether that's healthy or not all day, but that is the context here. I think this was in a rugby pathway. Some of these kids were close to having professional contracts, and look at the type of words that parents are trying to use to describe their child at their 40th. Parents, yes, do want, or some parents want, sportingly successful children, but they also want really good people as well. And so, as Gordon talked about, like having holistic programs, we need to hear the character words that your parents are using. And each sport, I think, focuses on developing certain different types of characters, because each sport is unique in the types of personality and character it develops. And we need to emphasize that story. We can't squash the parent expectations, because I don't think that's possible. But if we can make the other story louder in hearing, actually, parents, what do you want from your kid? One dad's or parents put their legend. I can't imagine a mum saying legend. I don't know why. Maybe that's a bit sexist of me. But dad said legend. A mum or dad said legend, friendly giant. These is how they want them to be described. And look, let's go back to this. This is before I use Mentimeter. This is old school pen and paper. None of that handwriting is mine. I always get a parent to do it because I'm miserable. The top right hand one, that was the England under-18 rugby parents. That's what they said about their children. And some of those kids, they had Eddie Jones in that day. They were about to go on tour to represent their country. And I asked them, how do you want your kids described at their 40th? And no one said World Cup winner, England captain. They say these character words. So yes, parents do have an expectation management challenge going on, but let's make sure we emphasize what parents also want, which is great kids and great people. And let's tell that story really well, and tell the story of how your sports program are helping do that. So maybe get past athletes to come back in and share, or past kids who have been through the process and come back and share that story. So you're making a lot of noise around the things that we all hope and expect our kids are getting out of the sporting journey. And the last thing I think I want to say about expectation management is what are your coaches' expectations on parents? Parents are human beings. We're giving them lots of information. We need to have realistic expectations on parent behavior change as well. Okay, there's no golden silver bullet, magic wand about kind of changing parent behavior. There's certainly lots of things we can do that are helpful to nudge behavior forward, but we're not going to get 100% of the parents behaving really, really well 100% of the time. And that's okay. That's human beings. And I think so. We want to help parents have healthy expectations, but we also want us as coaches to have healthy expectations around parents. If something is stressful, if we're having to break bad news to parents, for example, then actually parents might say something that's unhealthy, and we're going to talk about how we deal with conflict management in a moment. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helps us kind of empathize and understand it and work around it a bit. So for me, that's the first piece on expectation management. I've shown you those two. The second thing is kind of around handling conflict. How do we handle conflict? Firstly, I think in your conflict, you're going to have conflict, whether that's just a parent after a match moaning at you about I didn't think you managed that situation very well today, coach, or why wasn't my child given more time, or whatever, up to full on parent raging and being really angry with you. And I think the first thing to talk about is your own self-care and self-awareness in that. I had a coach say to me that once a dad rang him at 10:30 at night, slightly drunk, to have a big moan at him about the fact that his son had been dropped from a pathway. And the coach said to me, what should I do about that, Rich? And I said, well, the first thing is, why was your phone on at 10:30 at night? Okay, we have to take some responsibility for some of the times that parents can get hold of us. Some people work night shifts. Some people have children for 2 days out of a fortnight or whatever, and that means their availability to be able to send you an email at a time that's convenient to you isn't always going to happen. So we need to have good self-control about how we use these things. My emails are not on here, and at weekends, this is my phone. Look at it. My kids hate this phone. It texts, doesn't even have predictor text. So my text, if you text me at the weekend, well, none of you have this number, because only my family and a couple of close friends have this number. So I set some boundaries in there. I've got some self-awareness, some self-care that helps do that. The second thing I want to say about when you have conflict is try and de-escalate it. Lots of people say things heated in the moment, or a bit of keyboard warrioring. Try and give it a bit of time to calm down. I know everybody says the rule, please wait 72 hours or 48 hours before you make a complaint or go into conflict. That's good advice. Nobody does it. Why does nobody do it? Because our emotions are wound up. I don't know about you in your house, but when me and my partner have a disagreement, I'm not going to her, actually, I'm just going to wait 48 hours and then I'm going to bring this up with you. We don't do that. So the first thing we need to learn is that when a parent comes to us with an issue and they're emotionally dialed up really high, we want to de-escalate it. And de-escalating is simply going, I really want to talk to you about this. Can we talk about it then? And so just put it off for 2 days. I really want to talk to you about this. This isn't a great time. Can we move it on? Don't say this isn't a great time straight away, because that puts people's backs up. Acknowledge the fact you want to talk about this, but then de-escalate and say, I want to talk about it, but can we talk about it another time? Epic comms. So much conflict could be avoided if we were communicating the stuff that people were complaining about. So if you're getting complaints about selection, game day management, progress, etc., then you need to be communicating, or your coaching styles, then you need to be thinking about how you communicate that in really, really healthy ways. And I don't just mean via letters, okay? So for selection, if selection's a problem, have parents in for 15 minutes, give them the names of 10 people who have represented your country in that sport, say you've got to pick the best 5 and get them to work through the subjective challenge of selection so that they can see that that's really, really difficult. But back that up with simple comms. I think every sports team should have a 1-page sheet for their entire sports season. You might want to supplement it with some other information, but on that sheet is things like game time, selection policy, your coaching style. You should be able to summarize your coaching style in 3 or 4 bullet points, how to handle conflict, being honest and saying, we're going to fall out. This is how we want to try and handle it here. And your safeguarding. You should have your safeguarding stuff front and center. Okay. And then lastly, and handling conflict is a whole session, but I don't want to take up that time. When you meet with somebody, just try and think of a healthy way that's a way forward for everybody. So even if you're dropping a child from a pathway and someone's really upset about it, the way forward can't be, well, they can stay, because that's the coaching decision you've made. But you want to find a way that the parents feel heard and can feel like they can make progress and can keep moving forward. We often talk about in conflict about trying to find compromise. Nobody leaves a compromise feeling fulfilled and satisfied. It's far better to find the common ground that you're on and try and find a way forward on that common ground. It might be saying, actually, do you know what? We stuffed up the communication there. I can't solve that for yourselves, but I promise moving forward we'll get better at that communication, etc. And the last one I want to just talk about is competition day. There's a supermarket chain in the UK. I don't know if they still have them, but they used to have something called a golden greeter. And in our local village, it was an old boy who used to stand there and he'd have the mic and things like that. But he would greet people. I think the most important thing that can happen on competition day is that parents are greeted. Okay. Now, you may not have enough staff if you're running volunteers to do that yourself. So get a parent volunteer to do it. Get a parent volunteer to be the kind of golden greeter. If you are going to get the opportunity to greet the parents, here is my top tip. If you take nothing else from what I say, remember this practical tip. When you greet parents, say something positive about their child. Okay, and fix it into the expectation stuff. Talk about their character. Okay, so I coach hockey, field hockey on Tuesdays, and I love it. And when I see the parents before or afterwards, and often because of COVID, there's been milling around and filling out of apps and logging people in and sanitizing hands. It's been a great opportunity for me to go, oh, you're Jed's dad. Do you know what? Jed every week has a smile on his face. I absolutely love coaching him for that. You're Paul's dad. Brilliant. Do you know what? Paul last week really struggled with something and he kept working at it. It was great determination. You will see smiles on parents' faces about that. And you'll see smiles for 2 reasons. One, because it means you know who their kid is. That's really important to parents, that you know who their kid is. And secondly, you're giving their kid praise. And what ego and pride doesn't go, oh, cool, brilliant. When children come and play at my house, my children's mates come around and I answer the door. The first question every parent almost always asks is, did they behave today? I try and open the door straight away by going, your kid was brilliant today. They helped us lay the table. They helped us get up. Even if they've been pretty hard work, I still try and get in there and praise the kids. And if you've got conflict with a parent, again, say, this is a really important conversation. We're going to have this, but can I just say, we love having them here because of X, Y, Z. If you can greet parents on competition day, you will help the rest of the experience and give parents a positive start to that. And if you can't personally do that, because I understand ratios or it's a swimming pool and the environment doesn't make sure there is somebody there doing that. We need to stay calm with parents. The number of times that I've seen particularly on competition day, coaches really crank it up. I would be saying as coaches, we need to stay calm on competition days because that helps our athletes. But actually, if we're getting really animated, that's going to animate parents. And that's going to lead to bad competition day experiences. And lastly, and there's lots more we can say on competition day, let them play, okay? I've used loads of sideline games. If you go on my website, you can see a number of sideline games. Here's one we used to help a bunch of parents. Look, this was a wet and horrible day in Romford, a bit like it is today. We gave everybody nightclub kickers. They got 1 click. If they gave quality praise, if they gave an instruction or said something negative, the clicker went back down to 0. They policed themselves. I just got a crate of beer and said, who wants to win the beer? The parents were having so much fun that the lads came off at half time and went, what are the parents doing? They're having so much fun today. So in some ways, it's slightly backfired because it kind of distracted them from their sport a little bit. But it was a great way. We had fun with parents and it reset the sideline behavior. And we played that game once every season, but the game was talked about almost every week. So parents, if a parent was getting leery, they would say, oh, what would happen if you had a clicker today? And it just kind of meant the competition sideline was far, far better, far healthier. We tried it using opposition parents and our own parents, and that had mixed results, I'll be honest with you, but it meant that we were kind of continuing to just help parents monitor themselves, manage their own expectations, and work through that. And I think the last thing to say about competition day, Gordon talked about how do you handle disappointment. Again, I produced a number of video courses for parents with like a workbook that just helps parents go through how they handle disappointment and issues with a coach. So it's just helping them de-escalate it. And a number of sports clubs I use, just if a parent has an issue with them, says, why don't you work through that worksheet with Rich? And then that way, that'll help us really get to the issue and to be able to talk about it. So I hope you found that helpful. If you've got anything you want to challenge or come back on, please do. Gentlemen at I Coach Kids, I really appreciate the offer. Thank you very much indeed.
Richard, thank you for another insightful presentation. Two great presentations there. I particularly think that you've just changed my mind on a Father's Day present for my dad this Sunday. I might just get him a clicker. So even though I'm 30 years old, I think that could really work for me. But yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm now going to hand back over to Sergio, who will begin the questions.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks a million, Richard and Gordon. I've heard you both speak before, and I've shared some time with you, and I still got so many new things out of you today and enjoyed it so much. So look, I'm just going to ask you a very quick question before, because I know we've got quite a few questions in the chat from the audience, so I want to get to those as soon as. God, I wrote a million things really, but look, one quick question. I mean, you both have worked with parents in the performance pathway, in academies and talent development pathways, but also in grassroots sports. Is there a difference between those parents, or are there issues that are more pertinent to one side than the other? Open question to either of you.
It's a great question. I think it depends, really. I think different age groups, I think pathway stuff when kids are under 12, 13 does seem to create a more emotional response from parents, because we're still like primary carer for them. I've had the privilege of doing some work with like England under 20s rugby parents, and they're so chilled out about, or they present themselves, whether they are actually chilled out or not, I don't know, but they present themselves as kind of being chilled out about that. But then I had the opportunity to chat to Billy and Mako Vinopola's mum, and she would say that she hates watching her adult boys play rugby because she's worried about the big Welsh players tackling them. I'm thinking, flipping at your sons are huge. Why are you worried about that? So I think at different stages, certainly I think when we get the primary end, both in grassroots and performance pathway, I think it's just slightly more emotive, because as parents, we still have a lot more kind of influence and not necessarily control's the wrong word, but we're a lot more responsible for our kids' day-to-day actions at that point, and I think that makes it trickier. But I think it really depends on the type of sport and the age of the child.
Thank you, Richard. Gordon, anything from you on that question? Oh, you're on mute, mate. Your clicker count goes back to 0.
Yeah, I think as Richard said, I think it really does depend. I mean, I sometimes think that, I guess when they first join performance pathways, perhaps their expectations are raised because you've taken them from a grassroots environment. And I think sometimes when expectation raises, I think sometimes patience can go out the window and we suddenly expect more. I think there is an element of that, but I think once you're in those sort of pathway environments and you've done it for a while, as Richard said, I think you do start to get a greater understanding, and you hope as your children get older that they take a bit more of ownership of the program. Whereas I often feel in those early days when children are maybe 11 or 12 or 13, everybody's sort of fighting for social standing and fighting to get them in these programs in the first place, and it can be a big competition. I think back to my own time of that scrap for 9-year-old football contracts, which I look back on now with a degree of disdain, I guess. But it was bizarre, that age from 6 till 9. Now that was purely because that was the prize. It was like that. Well, there's the prize. That's the be all and end all. Everybody needs to get one of those things. And we wonder then why some of the behaviours are challenging, and maybe why people struggle to do the best things in the best interests of the children. You know, if that wasn't available, then people wouldn't have gone about it in that way in the first place. So, yeah, look, I think it does depend. But I also think the reality is, you know, parents love their kids, and whatever environment they're in, that you're going to meet the same challenges, I guess, just at different levels of the spectrum.
And that's a truth that every coach has to learn, really. And I was really happy that you mentioned, Gordon, that your attitude changed when you became a parent yourself. And immediately I thought about this fellow here. Okay, I coached the first 10 years of my coaching career. I coached as a non-parent, and then my first son was born, and straight away I thought, oh God, that's a different ball game. I really understood, and I took this little man and I put it in my pocket all the time, because my son used to play with this all the time. And I thought, I'm going to take this with me to every coaching session to remind myself that these kids are someone's child. And we just have to really accept that as coaches, really, that we are dealing with their own MVP, their most valuable possession, really. And we need to be really mindful of that.
I think, Sergio, you know, I think that's absolutely bang on. I feel, whether or not other people think this, I think I'm a far better coach and a teacher and an educator since having children. I think my awareness is far greater, and I think my understanding of what other people are going through is far greater than it ever was. I think I have a far greater empathy. But the reality is, not every coach is a parent. Not every coach we're going to be able to give that practical experience to. And I think that's why, as part of the piece that both Richard and I do, that the coach education piece is equally as important as supporting the parents.
Absolutely. Okay, listen, I know there's quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to hand over to Gary and let's see if we can cover as many of those as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on your last point there as well, Gordon, I think as I still class myself as a young coach, and I work with a lot of young coaches as well, particularly of 18 to 21, challenging some of the assumptions that they have about parents, because a lot of people in that age group aren't parents yet, is super important. So that's amazing insight. I'm going to jump to a question from Aaron first, who has asked you both, do you have any advice for parents who seem to live vicariously through the sporting experiences of their child?
I'm happy to take that. I don't see it anywhere. If I was just being straight up and honest, there's no research that's been able to find evidence of it, or it's a really hard thing to try and find research of. I meet parents who are excited about their kids making progress. I meet parents who will occasionally say, oh, when I was a kid, you know, I mean, you go down the pub, yeah, everybody had a trial for a Premiership football team, and then they broke a nail and they couldn't carry on playing, and that was a disastrous outcome for them. But most of the really passionate parents that I meet, they're not vicariously living their dreams. They are desperately worried about their children being hurt. I think that is what comes across to me, is that they don't want little Johnny or Jane to lose because they're worried about the pain that's going to create. They don't want them to be deselected. And that's not healthy parenting, but I think that is what fuels that passion. I don't think, and often that's because of a wound that they had as a child, and we're now getting into deep trauma therapy counseling and all that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, even some of the most passionate, and you know, as I go into schools and pathways and I see parents behaving badly on the sideline, and I just go and have a quiet chat with them, not an accusatory chat, but just try and hear their story. I don't hear them going, oh, I missed out when I was 13 and I want them to get on. I hear them not wanting them to miss out. And so the vicarious bit is probably they don't want their children to relive their pain, would probably be, and I think that's a healthier way of framing it. I understand the question, Aaron. I get it an awful lot. Gordon may see it, others may see it, and that may be a weakness in my experience, but I just don't see that as a reality. My son's a far better rugby player than I ever was, and if he can hear that, don't anybody tell him I said that. But he's a pretty boy in the backs and doesn't get involved in the proper stuff. But the reality is you know, as he missed out on a huge amount of trials. He tore his hip flexor on the first session back after lockdown, as I'm sure lots of kids did. He's worked out so hard during it, and I was just gutted. I was absolutely gutted for him. It's the most gutted I've been for him at anything, and it wasn't because he wasn't going to go on and represent a higher level that I got to represent at. It was just, I was like, flipping it, this poor kid has missed out for a year and a half on actually being able to play this sport. He's trained really hard on his own to keep going, and he's torn his hip flexor really badly, and some trials that are really important to him. That wasn't me trying to live vicariously. I think we managed it okay. He's okay and he's healed now. But yeah, sorry, that's quite a long-winded answer. Gordon, do you see it different?
Yeah, I guess it's just the use of language, isn't it? How that question's worded, isn't it? And it's probably, as you say, I think it gets used when everybody's just really passionate and really emotional about the kid in sport. I think the challenge for us as coaches, and I think as sporting organisations, is that the reality is that society sees sport in that way, and we've placed so much social capital on the success of sport and the way that that's portrayed in the media and some of the outcomes that are doing it, that actually by that being, I guess, sort of glamorized, or it being a really glamorous thing, there's a lot of people who think, wow, this is amazing. I want to be a part of that, and I would love my kid to be part of that. And then they look to go about trying to get them there. And I think that, you know, and I think that presents its own challenges. And I think particularly when the children haven't even gone through puberty, I think that provides even more challenges itself. So yeah, I agree with Richard that, you know, parents are passionate and emotional and want the kids to do well. I just wonder if we could do a little bit more as sporting organisations, as coaches. And again, it goes back to managing expectations, doesn't it? And actually being realistic about it.
Thank you both. I'm just going to move to a question from Guillermo for both of you as well. He is asking, what do you see a role for other parents in managing conflict with a particularly conflictive parent? So would you ever draw upon or utilize the other parents in the group to help deal with those issues?
This is a great question. Dr. Ed Hall from Newcastle did some research on Newcastle Falcons. And while he was doing a piece of research, he was filming, but he was always filming near the parents, filming the kids. He wasn't doing any research about parents, but he kind of did a second bit of research on the conversations he heard from parents. Because if a parent was moaning, the coach shouldn't have taken them off then, even if it was the parent of the child who replaced him. So one parent was moaning to another parent, and the parent whose child had been given the opportunity would agree with the parent, even though, I don't know if I've described that very well, basically, that even the parents would just agree with each other, even if there was no kind of logic to agreeing with one another, because they're all there together in a kind of parental tribe. And yes, I absolutely, definitely think there's a role for parents involved in that conflict. I absolutely do, particularly in the WhatsApp age. I mean, secret WhatsApp groups are just toxic to schools and all sorts of environments. And I think having a spy in there and a champion in there to say, hang on, let's give the teacher a chance or whatever is really, really important. Some clubs use parent representative groups really, really well. Some schools, I'm nurturing, mentoring some parent representative groups in a number of schools and pathways. And it's really exciting how those parents then go out and whisper the values, gossip the values around, model the values, become champions of the values. So yes, I think you've got to pick the right parents and you've got to give them support to do it well. But definitely, I think parents, especially for grassroots clubs, very few grassroots clubs I go into have a glut of coaches. They have too many coaches standing around not knowing what to do. So you've got to get the parents involved. And in a day and age where volunteering is having less and less value and getting people to do long-term commitment, if you could say, could you be the parent rep once a month on competition day, that's all of a sudden a manageable commitment for parents to make. And then you just do a little bit of a coaching session with them on how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, in a perfect world, I think if we create amazing environments as well as coaches and around our thing, and we're very protective of our group, and they've got amazing values and they do it, I would hope that the one person who maybe doesn't understand that as yet actually appears more the odd one out, and actually people take them on board and say, that isn't what we do here. You look at some of the schools and some of the environments I see, and you can see where it's done really, really well. And yes, okay, there may be an odd person who doesn't quite, I guess, toe the line or do it, but they soon, the nature of human nature is we all want to try and fit in and conform, but actually sometimes we need a bit of support and guidance to get us there. And I think parents can be a good tool to use. But as Richard said, you certainly want to pick you certainly want the right one doing it in the right way. I think would be the best way of saying it. But those parent groups are interesting. I don't know how you feel about this, Richard, but it's interesting when people get picked or volunteer, I guess more picked rather than volunteer for those parent groups, because then you hear other parents saying, oh, they must be the special one. They must have a special kid that they've been asked to do that in certain environments. And then you get other parents sort of thinking, oh, well, why have they been asked to do that? Are they more favourite than our kids? And it just shows you how complex relationships and environments actually are.
Well, I think that's quite easily resolved, really, by being really honest with people about the selection process and making it clear, and if you have a representative group, you have kids from a very mixed ability represented on the parent body, and it's very, very clear really quickly that parent body are there to listen to the other parents. So those parents are right away out harvesting information and gathering information in, so that it's quite clear they represent all parents. It's not just like a little clique of like the first team parents or the parents of the kids who are most likely to succeed moving forward. And I think you have to be honest, because I think, like with good comms, if there's secrecy about how people get on there, then that's different. I mean, the most ideal way would be that they're represented from within the parent body. That's like the gold star way of appointing parent reps. But you don't necessarily. I would have that system once I've set it up. So and again, in some of the places I'm doing, the first was we're asking 20 parents to come for an information gathering session, and then from those 20 parents, we're picking 10 depending on how they interact in that first session. And by how they interact doesn't mean they just say positive or supportive things. Far from it. In fact, actually, if they're honest and share their complaints and gripes, they're more likely to get on the group, because that's the type of people we want on there. So yeah, but we could spend a whole session talking about those, couldn't we?
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for one final question from Juan, who's asked, have you used strategies before, or do you have any strategies for engaging parents who often stay a little bit more distant from the sessions or from game days? Often there's parents who might not have the time to be there all of the time, or they might just like to give their child that little bit of breathing space. Do you have any advice in those instances?
I mean, for me, you've got to know their story, because I'm the grumpy man who goes and stands on his own anyway, and my motivations for doing that are just based on, working in sport for such a large part of my life, and I do it because I'm trying to show that it's my child's experience. I don't want to get caught up in some of the negative aspects of my own behaviour by being egged on by listening to other people, or maybe reacting to things, that are said and done around me. And I guess in more recent times, I'm trying to help him take and my daughter take ownership of their own sporting experience, because I want them to be intrinsically motivated by it, and it's not driven by my own passion and enthusiasm. Now, that's why I do it. I would still talk to a coach if they came over and wanted to have a chat with me and sort of say, oh, are you enjoying it and whatever else? I say, yeah, absolutely fine. And asking why we do that. But I think it's important as coaches as well that we don't jump to our own conclusions on that. People will have their own reasons for doing things, and you still get that. Coaches get frustrated in certain sports where they feel like the parents are using them for a babysitting service, and they don't actually care. And I think I very much see it from and then coaches say, oh, what do we do about that parent? And it's like, well, we do nothing about that parent, because actually as coaches and teachers, you do what's in the best interests of the kid. And I would always do that. And if I felt as a teacher or a coach that they maybe weren't getting some of that support, I would probably try and stand in a little bit where I could, and maybe offer that extra bit of support to the individual I'm working with or coaching. But I think that goes back to knowing the people you're coaching and knowing the parents that you're working with, and understanding that their background and their story.
I mean, yeah, I totally agree with Gordon. You've got to know the story. I'd also want to ask, why does it matter if they're not there? What is their kid missing out on if they're not there? If you're doing really good sessions with the parents about conversations you want the parents to be having around your values and things like that, then it might be worth just dropping them a call and saying, look, you know, we do some cool stuff at the end where we do a bit of a sum up. I understand for whatever reason you can't get there. Do you mind if I WhatsApp you the questions or send that home with your kid? I think we have to remember, kids spend far more time with their parents than they do in any other environment. So that contact that parent is having with that child is still massively more influential than the bit of time they may or may not spend with us on the sideline of a sporting fixture. And so I think that if we can just nudge some of the behaviours around that and think about why we're not getting those parents. If we're not seeing a lot of parents when we want to, then we need to be asking good questions of ourselves. If it's one or two, it's just accepting, I think, that parents parent differently. And there'll be 101 good reasons behind it, and there might be 101 bad reasons behind it. I had one dad who came to me and said, my 14-year-old son won't ever let me watch him play tennis. What do I do about that? And so we did some one-to-one sessions with the three of them to kind of help unpack that. And it was, you know, pretty painful stuff, to be honest with you. But that was quite an extreme case. Most of the time, I think it's just, like Gordon says, busy parents or people who just want to stay out of the way.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions today, but I'm sure that there's definitely an appetite for a part two of this webinar, and we'd love to have you on board again. But for now, thanks a million to both Gordon and Richard for your fantastic contributions, and thanks to everybody for your willingness to tune in and engage with us today. And we hope to see you on our next iCoach Kids Shares webinar, which will be on the 7th of July and will be based on skill acquisition in youth sport. So please keep your eye out for all of our posts and promotion and options to register for that event. In the meantime, stay safe, stay connected, and we will see you soon.